Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast. Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk, producer and host of the Public Relations Review Podcast. When I conceived this program, my idea was to provide public relations practitioners with a wide variety of solid, useful information and guidance from public relations professionals across America. And we are doing that. I will continue to cover important topics such as crisis communications and artificial intelligence and other such important topics. But I will also address other issues such as diversity in public relations, marketing to women, public relations trends, various data concerns, and much more. From time to time, I will also invite vendors of public relations products on to help you better understand how these products can improve your efficiency and your effectiveness. You will learn a lot from our podcast, so thank you for listening, and please inform your colleagues about the Public Relations Review Podcast and continue listening. Thank you so very much.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast and to our listeners across America and around the world. The Public Relations Society of America has a new chairman, T. Garland Stansell, and Garland is our special guest today. Now, just a quick background. He is the Chief Communications Officer for Children's of Alabama in Birmingham, Alabama. Garland, an APR, has more than 32 years of experience in public relations, marketing, health promotion, advocacy, and fundraising. Now, prior to joining Children's of Alabama as Vice President, he was Vice President of Public Relations and Development at the Alabama Goodwill Industries, and he was Assistant Director of Corporate Communications for Bank Boston Mortgage Corporation in their Alabama office. Stansell has a long tenure of leadership within PRSA, serving on the Board of Directors as Treasurer in 2018, Secretary in 2017, and at-large member from 2015 to 16, and much, much more. So, Garland, welcome to the program.
Peter, thank you. My privilege and pleasure to be with you today.
Now, in your January letter to members, you mentioned the 2020 vision. Now, and that specifically included 8 priorities. One is diversity and inclusion. So how does PRSA currently view the state of diversity and inclusion in the public relations profession, and what activities are contemplated to improve any shortcomings that you found?
Well, Peter, I tell you, the document that you're referring to is our strategic plan for 2020 through 2022, and we have known for quite some time that in the profession, as well as the membership of PRSA, that we are not as diverse as we would like to be. We have done some surveying, we have looked at the membership numbers, and know that we need to increase the diversity and inclusion throughout PRSA. So for the first time in this year's triennial strategic plan, we have diversity and inclusion as one of those priorities. We've had some programs in the past and some efforts toward diversity and inclusion, but this is the first time that we've had it as an actual priority in the plan. So, what we're hoping is that by making it a priority and then having specifics around that, we'll be able to raise more awareness around diversity and inclusion and to bring more people into PRSA. We've got some specific goals that are tied to diversity and inclusion. One of those included doing a D&I survey, which was led by PRSA's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. back in the second half of 2019, and that was led by Felicia Blow, APR, and Andrea Gills-Monzon, who are the co-chairs of our National Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at those results, then from that we have developed a diversity and inclusion strategic plan, and looking at the landscape and what we can do in addition to what PRSA has already been doing. We've had the committee, we've given awards to chapters around the country who have really set the standard for diversity and inclusion, increasing diversity in their ranks, raising the visibility for diversity in those communities. So we've done that for a number of years. We've had a diversity month focus. In addition to that, we've also looked at other months where we've tried to raise visibility around diversity, such as in February for Black History Month, in March for women, in June for LGBTQ. So different times that we have tried to raise that visibility, and then celebrating in August Diversity and Inclusion Month. And we've had a toolkit that we put out there so that the chapters around the country of PRSA can take that toolkit and help to raise the interest around diversity and the visibility around diversity and celebrate diversity. So we've done those things in the past, but we've wanted to try to go beyond that and look at not only just diversity and raising the issue of diversity, but raising more around the idea of inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we as an organization become an inclusive organization, and how are we being welcoming to whether it's race or gender or sexual orientation, or another one of our pillars priorities this year is our international reach, and looking at those that we have from international communities who are part of PRSA, those who work for international companies, those with different backgrounds. So all of that, we're looking at how can we be a more inclusive organization across the board.
Well, just a quick question here, because you did mention inclusion. Do you help people understand the differences not only between diversity and inclusion, but also the benefits, and sell the benefits that other people have seen as a result of their diversity programs? What benefits have accrued to their various and sundry organizations as a result of it? Right.
We, honestly, we have not in the past. But that is one thing that our research in the survey did show, and one of the things that we have written into our plan for this year on diversity and inclusion is looking at how can we as PRSA kind of be a thought leader around diversity and inclusion, and offering to our chapters and our districts and our sections that kind of information. What is the difference between diversity? What do we mean by inclusion? Mm-hmm. What do we mean by equity? And how can the various members in the chapters and districts and sections help to further inclusion and equity in their own communities, since the communities all over the country are going to be a little different. So what we're hoping we can do is lay the groundwork, provide them thought leadership and definitions from which they can work, and then augment that with an updated toolkit of sorts that they can take and customize depending on their particular area, mm-hmm. in whatever type of diversity and whatever challenges they may be having with inclusion there in their own community.
Let me add a little bit more to that, because several years ago I wrote an article here in Nashville that talked about diversity, but this particular article focused on disability. And what I did with that was I happened to read another article that one major bank in New York had discovered that their outdoor ATM machines was causing a problem for people in wheelchairs because, it was a straight wall there, and the wheelchair wheels kept bumping into the wall, so they could not actually get to the panel to do what you need to do to use the ATM machine. So they made that alteration on those machines. As a result of it, not only did they get massive publicity, but then people from the disability community appreciated what they did and swarmed into the bank to begin to open accounts. So helping people understand not only why we were inclusive, but the benefit that accrued to the users that eventually flowed to us as an organization. So it had tremendous benefits.
Right. Well, and that's exactly right, and that's what we're hoping that we can accomplish through thought leadership and providing information, highlighting those opportunities, so that then in communities around our chapters, districts, and sections can make a difference. But one of the things that we would like to do is to encourage those members and chapters and districts and sections around the country to engage with their local community. So if there is something, as you just mentioned, in their own community where there is any group that is kind of disenfranchised because they are not included, that maybe the local group can take that on to try to kind of be the voice for them and be the PR, almost an agency or voice on behalf of that group. So those are the kinds of things beyond just saying we want more diversity in our membership and we want to be more inclusive in PRSA with our own membership, but also to encourage our members to look at, are there ways locally that they can become engaged that can make a difference in diversity and inclusion in their own communities?
Well, and I agree with that. Some years ago when I was the chair of our diversity committee here in Nashville some years ago, one of the things that I wanted to do was to bring some of the people from those various communities in and say, well, fine, here are some of the mistakes that people have been making in dealing with our organization or our group of people or the people in under our umbrella, whether it's Hispanic, primarily that's where we were. But sometimes folks forget about Asians. I mean, we've got a huge bunch of Asians that are probably not, being addressed. And here in Nashville, we've got one of the largest Kurdish communities in the country, and we don't really think about those. One other quickie was I read an article in one of the PR publications about how to market to the blind. Wow, that was a lightning bolt for me. I had no idea. So I called a guy up who happened to be an instructor at one of the colleges in Pennsylvania and asked him if he would like to be on the show and do an interview. And not only did he agree, but he said, oh, by the way, my partner in writing this article is blind. Can he come? Of course. So what we found out is that there's a huge market that sometimes we overlook, and once you understand what the how to go about accessing it without stepping on people's toes and everybody's comfortable, they can open up a wide variety of markets for people that maybe hadn't thought about it in the past.
Right. And that is an excellent point. We tend to many times think of diversity and inclusion just in gender and race, or gender, and many times in this country just black and white, or maybe now black and white and Hispanic. But there's so many more parts to diversity and inclusion, to, as you said, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, any number of other different nationalities, but then also all those persons with disabilities and the different disabilities that they are living with every day, and how are we as an organization being inclusive for persons with disabilities, and are we helping to make our communities better for those persons with disabilities? So those are all of the types of things that we're looking at. Is, I guess, in one thing you said, what will we be doing is really trying to broaden our own definition and our own thinking for our members of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And what does that look like? What does that look like in their own community? And how can we use, our knowledge and our positions to make a difference? That's what we're looking at doing.
And maybe one way of helping, as I listen to you say that, one of the things that just popped into my mind is having a diversity panel of people from those areas that we normally don't think about, as you said, or had brought up. How many disabilities are we talking about? We could be talking about blind. We could talk about those who are hearing impaired. That might be a bit more, but who bound to wheelchairs. Somebody from those areas to have a panel to say, here's what we need and how we need it to be delivered to us. So,
right.
Just in terms of thought leadership, let's hear from those people that we are not reaching to find out what does it take to reach you.
Right.
So I'm just sort of.
It takes a little different way of thinking, and considering that in the typical ways that we communicate are probably not right for every audience.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at diversity and in looking at it being inclusive to especially those with disabilities, but not only disabilities, but other, diverse characteristics, that we may have to communicate differently and not have a kind of one-size-fits-all communication strategy.
You are absolutely right, because I'm sitting here thinking about the blind folks, and, what was encouraging as I listened to the professor talk was that how much money these folks spend. So if you are a PR firm for a commercial agency and you're not dealing with these folks the way they need to be dealt with, there's a large slice of an economic pie that you're not benefiting from.
Right.
So what about some of the awards? You had mentioned some of the awards that for diversity. What, if you can recall, maybe what some of the organizations did that brought that award in dealing with the diversity issue? I'm
trying to remember. I know we give one award every year, and it's to a chapter that wins the diversity award for the year. We've had one chapter that's in southeast Wisconsin that has won the award for a couple of years because they have been doing exactly what I've been talking about, kind of changing the conversation around diversity and inclusion. They have been reaching out to their community. They have been connecting members to some projects in the community. And then because they have done that, they've attracted more diverse membership and people who have said, oh, well, it looks like they get diversity and inclusion and they're interested in making a difference in the community, and I want to be a part of that. And they've reached out to look also for partnerships in their community that could support their efforts. And that's another thing that we've been trying to look at with PRSA is how can we strike some international partnerships? How can we look at partnerships with Black PR Society, the Hispanic PR Society, so that those members also know about PRSA and what we're doing and can look at maybe benefiting even from our professional development that we have, and that we can try to together work to strengthen diversity and inclusion. Another one of those things that we have done is PRSA also has the PRSA Foundation, and the focus of the foundation for some number of years has been on diversity and inclusion. And the foundation gives a number of scholarships every year, and those scholarships typically, most of them are tied to students with diverse backgrounds. And so we've been looking at building that, and then PRSA, along with the foundation, has joined with several other organizations to look at developing a diversity and inclusion action alliance where we may be able to bring to bear the efforts of many communication-oriented organizations where we may be able to start raising more thought leadership around diversity and inclusion. And eventually, I think the idea is to be able to work through some of the larger agencies around the country to hopefully inform hiring practices so that there are more hires made from, diverse communities. All of it kind of ties together. We're working closely with HBCUs and the historic Hispanic universities to also develop some relationships to help educate young people on public relations and other communication disciplines as options for them for a career, so that we can get into those. There's some scholarshiping, and they understand that this is an opportunity for a career. We've made some relationships with these agencies and corporations who are willing to hire as interns these students, and then hopefully hire them on after that. So we're kind of trying to work all sides of that so that we can attract young people who are making their decisions as far as their career to go into a communications career. And so that's kind of on that side to feed more of a pipeline of those from diverse backgrounds who are interested in going in communication.
Well, let me ask you right quick, and obviously some of these things just pop up as I listen to you, as I said, going into careers, but most high schools and maybe even some junior high schools have career days. Has there been an outreach effort in terms of PR chapters appearing at high schools at career days to say, this is what public relations, here's some of the things we do, here's some people, and here's how we do it, that sort of thing, so they can see? And then two, maybe even, I think there's a National Hispanic PR Association as well, some sort of joint programs with them to find out how we can collaborate to maybe do some cross-pollination of efforts here. Right.
And we have connected with the National Hispanic PR Association. So we have connected with that group. We are working alongside that in the Black PR Association, and then through those universities that historically are either Hispanic or Black schools. And so we're working through those. To answer your question in regard to the high schools, there has not been a concerted effort yet, not from PRSA. I do believe that down the line that is part of the plan of the Action Alliance, but really doing that more so through some of the members in the larger agencies and the larger corporations who may be going to high schools anyway and doing those kinds of career fair activities. So, but you're exactly right that it does help if they know in high school when they're looking at going to school, selecting a college or university, that they are aware of the communication positions that are out there and those kinds of careers that they may want to find more, about before they ever get to school, to higher education.
Again, some of these things just pop into my mind. I was watching ESPN, maybe last week or week before last, and they were doing a 30 by 30 or whatever on Michael Vick. Now, obviously, that football player who got himself into deep trouble because of the dog fighting. Well, once he got out, he was basically a pariah. Nobody wanted to touch him. And he says, look, I think I've learned my lesson, but I need to find a way to let people know that. Well, he said he did some research, and he tracked down some woman who was African-American in Atlanta and got in touch with her and said, I need some help. I want to try to restore, I'm really serious about this. And she put him through his paces to make sure that he was not going to waste her time. But I think the stroke of genius that she did that really began to turn the corner for him is that she hooked him up with the PETA folks. Prevention of a PETA, forget what the acronym, against cruelty to animals, something along those lines.
Right. And people Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I understand. And so he sat down, or she had arranged for Michael to meet with the president of PETA. And she said, there are no holds barred, ask him anything you want, any sort of litmus test you want to apply. But this, I think, it worked to the benefit for both of you. And she let him have at him. And well, eventually it did work. So Michael, and I think Michael did admit that, he was wrong because he listened to the wrong people, so forth and so on. So the fact that that and some other things, it probably took him a year or more, but obviously he got back into the National Football League and turned things around for himself. So getting somebody like that to maybe speak at the PRSA or something along, I forget the lady's name, I can probably go track it down, but having somebody of that caliber and has done something that was massive in correcting somebody else's errors for them, and all for the good.
Right. And I did want to go back and tell you that in the strategic plan for D&I, one of the strategies that we talked about was looking into going into the high schools. I've looked back at this, and so looking at a program that would look at recent graduates from college, then looking at PRSA, the Student Society of America, attracting more diverse students into PRSA, but even before that, launching an awareness program as far as what is PR and what is communication at high schools, and working that through high school counselors to do just what you said, to educate around public relations and career choice at, that earlier at the high school age.
Well, just a quick background on myself. I sort of learned PR on the fly, so to speak. Worked my way up to being a press secretary for the former chairman of the House Education and Labor Committee, and then working in a presidential campaign and handling communications for an assistant secretary of education, along with the radio and some other sort of things. So I actually have gone into and do go into particularly right now, the college level PR classes, and let them know, here's what I do. Here's some of the major problems that I've had to solve for clients. And at that level, it really pays off, and there's a lot of satisfaction with going with this job. But it's a lot of work. Basically, what I tell them is that what you're being taught in this class, you're being taught by other folks who are learning it in their classes around the country. So the best thing you can do is be the best you can at what you do. Because if you're not at the top of your game, there's somebody else that's going to step in and take the job you thought you might be able to get.
Right. And one of the things, Peter, that we've looked at and talked about from an inclusion standpoint is we do have a number of young people who come from various backgrounds, whether it's their race or whether it's their sexual orientation or they have a disability, and they do graduate in PR, and many times they are hired, but the inclusion piece then is what is missing, where they may not be included in the work environment in the same way that someone else may be included. So when they get to work, they don't see other people who look like them. They don't meet other people who look like them, and maybe they're not given the best assignments. And so we will find many times that there will be people who come into the workforce and then they become disenchanted because of that first experience. So one of the things that we are looking at through PRSA's efforts and through the efforts of others is to see if there's some kind of a mentoring program where there's a mentor, whether it's in that same company or outside that company, who can help mentor these young people coming into the workforce so that they stay with PR and they work through those issues and they learn how to advocate for themselves and they have a mentor who can advocate for them. So many times it's not necessarily that there are not young people graduating that come from diverse circumstances, but then when they get into the workforce, they may not stay with it. They may decide, oh, well, this is not for me, and they end up going into sales or they end up doing something else because they didn't have that mentor, and their experience was not an experience where they felt accepted and they were included. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is, can we help to affect that and make that change where young people, regardless of circumstances, do feel included. They do feel like they have a voice. They do see that they can be productive in a PR communication position.
And let me just add to that, because as I'm listening to you, one of the things that came to my mind immediately, because you're right, somebody, a handicapped person, for instance, goes into a company and they feel that they're not being treated equally and fairly, that can have a serious downside for that company, because we are branding people, and our company and what our employees say is part of our brand. And if what they say is negative, that they just sort of put me in the corner and gave me some menial work, that's not going to go over well. So my thinking is that maybe you need to have a CEO summit, about here's how to make your diversity program successful, and that those people who are there need to be included at the table when decisions are made, see how decisions are made, and have some input into it as well. So how that piece of it that you want to develop, I think, should including those from that community to make sure that things go well, because just having a mentor might not come from a high enough level to say we're serious about this, so let's make sure they get some serious help and opportunities here.
Right. Yep, that's a very good point.
So, well, Garland, I know that we had wanted to squeeze in a little bit about artificial intelligence, so if you've got some maybe overarching input about, or your insights or some remarks you'd like to make about artificial intelligence, I would say now is the time.
Okay. Well, I know that, that is on everyone's mind, and I've heard, some people in communication say, well, what are we going to do with that? Is that, is artificial intelligence going to replace a person? And, my thought around that is that communication, public relations, although we find ourselves in the 21st century being very high tech, we are a high touch industry. We are a high touch profession. And so we've got to learn as communicators how we can remain high touch but utilize the technology for good, and utilize that for the good of the organizations that we serve. So I certainly do think that in a lot of not only our research, there are ways that we can use artificial intelligence to help build research when we are looking into a campaign, looking into some situation, that we could use artificial intelligence to maybe do that research in a more cost-effective way. Mm-hmm. And so that's the main way that I could see using artificial intelligence, is to be able to do the research, whether that's, phone surveys or computer surveys, or in some way that we are collecting data. And instead of having to hire a lot of people to make calls or to develop and deploy our research instruments, that artificial intelligence can be used for that. I also think there's some ways that artificial intelligence can be used as part of the tactics in a campaign, where that artificial intelligence is serving up and delivering messaging. So we were talking earlier about not having communication that's a one-size-fits-all. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're looking at how do we reach a person who has a hearing challenge, or a person who has a visual challenge, or some other kind of challenge, artificial intelligence could very well help us to be able to reach them in a way that we were not able to do before. It may help them to be able to interact with us and interact with our clients, our companies, in a way that they have not been able to before. So I think there are a lot of ways that artificial intelligence can be used as a tool of public relations, of communication, that can make us more effective, possibly save time, and in the long run probably save money, but do so in a way that doesn't replace what we do, but just augments what we do.
You know, I agree with you, and I think the one thing that I have gotten out of people talking about artificial intelligence is that it does not replace creative thinking. And we are a band of creative thinkers, and that's how we solve a lot of problems. So for me, as long as I stay in that particular lane, I'm comfortable. I know it's coming. Well, it's already here. But I don't panic that the fact that the artificial intelligence is crunching the data, because I'm not a numbers person. And thank you, artificial intelligence, for doing that. I'll just stay on the creative side of things. So.
Right. And I think there are ways, too, that we can use artificial intelligence to help us with our evaluation, because we've looked at for years, how do we effectively show return on investment, and how do we show we move the needle, and how do we evaluate? So just to your point, artificial intelligence can help us crunch those numbers and help us be able to evaluate the campaigns that we have better than we've been able to in the past.
Absolutely. Well, Garland, I have certainly enjoyed talking to you, and if there's any way that I can help you down the road, your folks in New York know how to track me down, and I'd love to maybe have a conversation, as I said, if there's a way that I can offer any assistance to you at all. So I certainly want to thank you for being a guest on the Public Relations Review.
All right, Peter, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Good, and we look forward to hopefully having a chance to talk to you in the near future.
All right.
Thank you, and have a great day.
All right, you too.
Okay.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.